Tobias, you and I don't always agree on things. We normally have a degree of mutual respect. Do you understand why I think, had people known the truth, had they known that this was not somebody, as was being said online, who'd crossed the English Channel in a dinghy in October 2023, we might not have had riots on that scale in Southport last night?
Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me on your show. And let me just perhaps set out my stall, and I'll be grateful to hear your thoughts. I mean, we've spoken many times as on air and indeed off air as well. There's much that we're aligned on, as you suggest, not least UK defence and security. Where we've disagreed, we've done so with respect, without the conversation heading south, as so often political discourse descends these days. And where there's a difference of opinion, it's in that spirit of keeping the bar high. I hope we can have a frank conversation about this, better understand each other's views, that I join you today. On this, I hope you'd agree that we need to begin by recognizing the loss of life here. That's where our first thoughts should be, with the 3 that have been killed and the others that have been injured. But, as you said in your introduction, there's now a wider community suffering, and not just struggling and coming to terms with this horrible attack, but the subsequent orchestrated, sickening, violent riots that's taken place, leaving police officers injured, some of them very, very seriously indeed. And it is those false claims, the disinformation, which you quite rightly point out, on the internet, whipping up that frenzy of hate, spreading disinformation, encouraging the English Defence League, who's rallied its supporters with the sole intent of stirring up hate and seeking to divide. And it's this incident which raises so many, if we're going to prevent this from happening in the future, the speed in which fake news went from swirling around online to the violence offline. The failure of Twitter, also, that you should be aware that speculation was going to rise. Why didn't they properly police the platform? And then, this has come to you, sir, the role of influential voices such as yours. And my humble request is to recognize what you say matters. You, sir, have a reach and an influence well beyond most MPs. People listen to you. They form their views by what you say. It's one thing to affect and disrupt mainstream thinking, as you've done very effectively over the last decade or so, or longer, in political matters. But I respectfully ask you to recognize that when it comes to matters of security and indeed terrorism, because that's the word you use, something that's directly affected my life, that those with a public profile do need to be aware of how their words could be taken out of context, especially when it comes relating to terrorism, not least Islamic extremism. That's simply my position, which I hope you would agree or at least understand.
Yeah, I mean, the EDL element of it, I'm sure there were some EDL activists that came in from other parts of the Northwest. Also true to say that most people on those streets last night did actually live in Southport. To listen to the BBC this morning, you'd have thought that everybody had been shipped in from sort of outer space, which clearly wasn't true, and the arrests and the stats do prove that. Tobias, I would argue this. I would come back at you by saying this. Had my questions been answered clearly, we would have ended much of that false fake news speculation that was going on social media. And, there is a deep sense of unease in this country that something is going wrong. Had we been told a bit more, and I know the guy was 17, and that makes it more complicated, and I do get that, I think it's reasonable that I ask those questions. And I don't believe anything I did in any way was stirring up disorder. In fact, I put it to you, if I'd been answered clearly, the riots would have been smaller.
Well, you touched on something absolutely fundamental to our law. It would have been illegal to actually spell out the circumstances, given that this was a minor, a 17-year-old. Now, maybe that's a question that now needs to be deliberated, but that's for you to take to the Home Affairs Committee or raise in Parliament. My concern is that you are now a political leader. You're in Parliament itself, regardless of party. I hope you'd always put the country's interests first, because has this been good for Britain, what happened last night? It's very easy to play on people's anxieties, on their anger, their frustrations. And there's much to be concerned about. You and I can have a big debate about where our world's going, why we're not doing enough. But Parliament must look for solutions, and parliamentarians must offer the wisdom and the leadership that offers answers. We must do nothing to absolutely inflame the situation. I will agree with you in part about keeping people informed. We had a terrible incident in Bournemouth here. where a couple of people lost their lives because of a freak wave that came through and they drowned. The speculation that came through that it was to do with one of the boats, the big boats that operate in this area, the boat operator lost his job because of it. It had nothing to do with it. But the police were very slow in providing information.
Yeah. No, the truth matters. Yeah, yeah, the truth matters.
The speculation to go overboard, it really did. From there, I do absolutely agree with you. I simply plea with you that you must recognize that your comments, particularly on terrorism, that I lost my brother in the Bali bombing, okay? You know that I've been affected by terrorism, not once, but a number of times in my life. So when people use that word, and it's right, it's still there. We've got ISIS-K that's going to grow larger than Al-Qaeda. What are we doing about it? These are important questions that you and I can spend a lot of time discussing and debating. But when we tie it up in what's going on in Southport, until we have the information, this person, I understand, may have been from Rwanda. Rwanda is mostly a Christian, Catholic country. So again, things have got out of control.
No, Tobias,
my voice can help calm things down.
I didn't stir any of that. I thank you for coming on the programme.